Welcome back, and Merry Christmas. Today's book is a Christmas pageant sort of book. It's got an inn with no room, shepherds and wise men all showing up on the same night in a stable on the evening of Christmas. And plus, it's in rhyme, and it will definitely remind you of another famous Christmas poem. 'Twas the Evening of Christmas, written by Glynis Nellis, illustrations by Elena Selavanova. Glynis Nellis was born and raised in a little village in northern England, but now lives in Michigan with her husband David. She grew up in a big old house with 2 wonderful parents and 7 brothers and sisters. At primary school, her teacher was the one who encouraged her to write. 4 long decades later, she found herself living in America, married to an amazing man, mom to 4 wonderful children, grandma to 3 bouncing boys and 1 gorgeous girl. And if all that wasn't glorious enough, she somehow became an author, despite giving up on her first book halfway through. Elena graduated from the Moscow State University of Printing Arts and has collaborated with many of the main Russian publishing houses and other publishers worldwide, and illustrating over 100 books in 20 years. She lives and works in Moscow, and like many artists, she now works in both sketching and digital illustration. "'Twas the evening of Christmas, when all through the town every inn was so crowded no room could be found. Tired Mary and Joseph, who went door to door, at last found a place on a small stable floor. "'Thank goodness,' said Mary, who tiptoed inside. The mice saw the donkey and scurried to hide. The rest of the creatures all cuddled up tight in hopes that they might have a calm, peaceful night. The pigeons were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of breadcrumbs danced round in their heads. The cows closed their eyes, and the oxen laid down. The doves cooed so gently, the lambs made no sound. The moon through the trees was just starting to glow, with a glimmer of light on the stable below, when quite by surprise came a newborn babe's cry that woke all the animals sleeping nearby. Up jumped the cows and the oxen and sheep. Up jumped the pigeons, aroused from their sleep. They all came to gaze at the small baby boy as his mama and papa hugged him with joy. Now donkeys, now cows, now pigeons and sheep, now oxen and mice in the manger did peep. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples so sweet, as they nuzzled his fingers and cute little feet. And out in the fields, taking care of their sheep, some shepherds were just getting ready to sleep, when all of a sudden they had such a fright as a whole choir of angels lit up the night. But the song of the angels, the words that they said, soon let the men know they had nothing to dread. "Dear shepherds, it's wonderful news that we bring. A Savior is born. He is Jesus the King." They ran to the stable and peeked through the door, and saw something never imagined before. There, in a manger, a baby boy lay, no blankets, no pillow, his bed made of hay. And to that small stable came 3 splendid kings, with gifts for the baby, all beautiful things. They jumped from their camels and knelt at his feet, with their frankincense gold and myrrh that smelled sweet. The stable was filled with a wonderful light, as stars above Bethlehem twinkled so bright. And high in the heavens, God whispered, "My son, you'll bring hope to the world and love everyone." Then back to their slumbers the animals curled, amazed at this babe who had entered their world. As Mary and Joseph got ready for bed, they snuggled their baby and kissed his sweet head. As Mary laid Jesus asleep in the hay, she thought about all that had happened that day. The mice heard her whisper as she tucked him in tight, "Merry Christmas, my son, and to all a good night." The end. And here's the story behind Glynis's first book. Remember the one she gave up on halfway through? Now recall that when she was in elementary school, she loved to write. And then years and years and years later, back in 2008, she decided to write a children's book. But then one day, she quit. Glynis says, "I quit writing because I had a visitor. I never saw him, but I heard his voice whisper in my ear as he tapped me gently but persistently on my shoulder. And the voice said, 'What are you doing? You can't write a children's book. You'll never get it published. You're wasting your time.'" She says, "I listened to that voice. It was hard not to. Obediently," she says, "I put my half-finished manuscript on the shelf where it sat for a long time, gathering dust. And then one day, her husband, David, encouraged her to go back and finish that book. And then 3 years later, she nervously attended a writer's conference clutching that first ever manuscript, and she could hardly believe it when the editor she met with that day was actually interested in her stories. And a year after that, she had a book contract. And since then, she's published 30 books, at least. More often than not, that little voice in our head that says, "Give up. You can't do that. Just quit." That little voice isn't actually true, is it? It's often completely wrong. See you next week.